Okay, so the last section of our afternoon, we're going to invite two talks by past obstetric anaesthetic fellows. Unfortunately, in 2020, COVID happened and one of our presentations couldn't take place, but they deserve to be here and to detail their good work. The projects are usually endorsed by NIOAN and supported by us, and they do great regional work across all the trusts. So to begin with, I'll introduce Ciara, and Ciara is now a consultant anaesthetist in the Southern Trust, and she is due to have her own experience of obstetric anaesthesia very soon because there's a little baby on the way. So thank you, Ciara.
Thank you, Rachel. I don't know if I'm more anxious or less anxious after all today's talks for a few weeks' time. So I'm going to chat a bit about a project, the NIOAN regional project from sort of 2019 to 2020, which was led by myself for 6 months and then by Dr. Karen Sykes. And this was on creating an anaesthesia for caesarean section information leaflet. Yeah. So first of all, why did we want to do this? Well, we wanted to ensure consistency in the information that patients were being given throughout the region, and really to support and improve the overall process of informed consent. There is an AAGBI publication on consent for anaesthesia. It was published in 2017, and it does state as one of its recommendations that information about anaesthesia and its risks should be provided as early as possible in the form of an evidence-based online resource or as a leaflet. So this is just a brief sort of timeline of the year. We started in September 2019, first of all by collating the information that was given out at that time by each trust. In October, trainee champions were identified in each trust. In November, the first draft of the many drafts was completed and approved by the NIOAN committee. It then went on for sort of departmental feedback from each anaesthetic department across Northern Ireland in December. In the January, there was a committee consensus on the final draft to be sort of sent on for patient feedback. And then from February to March, we had patient feedback. There's just March, sort of the handover of the obstetric fellow that occurs sort of 6 months through the academic year. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic came along and did delay us a wee bit in getting sort of the patient feedback and then on to the launch of the leaflet. So these are some of the sources that were used whenever creating our evidence-based patient resource. First of all, the trust information that was given out within each trust, the OA leaflet on your anaesthetic for caesarean section, the Labour Pains website, and I also created a small patient focus group of patients within Royal Maternity Hospital who were attending for pre-assessment for an elective caesarean section. And really it was to involve patients from the outset on what they wanted to know. So what information, how they wanted to access it, and where they wanted to access the information. This wouldn't have been possible without the trainee champions who were appointed in the sort of October of 2019. It was sort of on a first come, first served basis. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work by everybody, because it's certainly not something I could have embarked on myself. So Brendan and Johnny in the Southeastern Trust, Scott in the Northern Trust, Garway, who I think is going to be speaking after me, worked in the Southern Trust, and Andrew in the Western Trust. So in December, we went on to get departmental feedback. There were slides sort of produced for the trainees to be presented at the department, whether that be at audit meeting or sort of another format. And that was to sort of share the overall vision or goal of the project, and then to disseminate the actual leaflet. And we got really constructive feedback on a lot of different aspects, whether it be the language used, specific words that might cause confusion, the actual length of the document, and then sort of looking at online versus paper and how sustainable the use of paper leaflets might be. The summary was then presented. Summary of this feedback was presented to the NIOAN committee, and each point that was raised was considered, and then changes were made to the resource prior to going on for patient feedback. After sort of the end of the departmental feedback, we had a sort of long and short version of the resource, which then went on for sort of patient input. In order to get patient feedback, a questionnaire was created, and we asked sort of questions on language, the illustrations that were used, how useful the information was it enough information, was it clear on the risks, where were they willing to access it, did they prefer a long or a short version, and where did they sort of want to be told about the leaflet? Would it be at like the antenatal clinic, was it at the pre-assessment clinic, or were they just willing to access it online via a patient hub? There are some comments from the patients. There were both positive and negative comments on the leaflet, which was really great to see and really helpful to ensure that it was as patient-centred as possible. We did get 58 responses from across Northern Ireland. 27 of these were antenatal patients awaiting a caesarean section, 26 were postnatal patients who had undergone a caesarean section, and 9 of the responses, it wasn't actually documented whether they were ante or postnatal. And as you can see, there's a few big long comments, but you know, things like it was clear and concise, they felt the pictures were good. One woman felt that it was really important that actually everyone should get it so they had a better understanding if they needed an emergency section. Some felt that there could be a bit more about what happens afterwards, you know, that there's an availability of like a debrief service, or that some information on recovery do's and don'ts like driving or housework and things like that. And I just wanted to highlight one specific question regarding the usefulness of the leaflet. So 92% of patients who reviewed the leaflet and the feedback agreed or strongly agreed that the information contained was useful and would be useful to them before their caesarean section. So this is a QR code that will take you to the finalised short version of the leaflet for anyone that would like to have a wee look at it. But I just, sort of reflecting on this, I sort of thought about some of the challenges that could be faced when embarking on a project like this. First of all, working across multiple sites within Northern Ireland, although Northern Ireland isn't a huge place, things are sort of done differently in each trust. And it would have been really difficult to do this and embark on this project without the trainee champions working together cohesively. That we sort of had good communication and all the trainees worked really hard and stuck to the deadlines that were set. I do think that the sort of way that we've all kind of taken on the use of video platform sort of conferencing and would make this even easier in the future for sort of future regional projects. Then on to sort of the handover of the obstetric fellow. Often the fellowship is a 6 months post and there's a handover to another fellow sort of halfway through the year. And I suppose there's a risk of loss of momentum of the project. And Karen and I tried to tackle this by ensuring that we had adequate time for a really thorough handover, but also that we kept in contact afterwards just to sort of ensure there wasn't any duplication of work, and that Karen knew what was done and what needed done over the next few months. And then finally, as with all things in 2020, COVID-19 definitely did pose a challenge. It did affect the way that we were able to obtain our patient feedback. We originally wanted to create patient focus groups, but we couldn't really be bringing patients into the hospital unnecessarily. So we had to adjust how we sought out our feedback from patients. And then it did ultimately affect the overall launch of the leaflet. It was meant to be presented at the 2020 NIOAN meeting, which was unfortunately cancelled. So I'm going to leave this up if anyone wants to scan the QR code to have a wee look. And I suppose I want to thank the NIOAN committee for giving me the opportunity to be involved in a project like this. I got some really useful skills and experience and give me lots to talk about at upcoming consultant interviews, which is always a great help. And I would highly recommend for any trainees considering applying for the obstetric fellowship in the future that this is a part of it that is really, really useful and be really beneficial to you. Thank you.
Great work, Ciara, thank you. And last, by no means least, can I introduce Dr. Garway Ho, who is an ST7 and we're currently working in Craigavon Hospital. He finished his fellowship last year, 2021. up to the podium, Garway. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. It's nice to be here with you again this year. Thank you for inviting me to present. As mentioned there, I was last year's obstetric fellow, and along with Dr. Mitch Key, who's not here with us, he's having a great time in Australia with his family. So I'd like to present our project from last year, which was the development of a management guideline for post-dural puncture headaches. So the aim of what we wanted to do, really, we wanted to produce an evidence-based standardized approach for the management of ladies who present with accidental dural puncture or post-dural puncture headache across Northern Ireland. Primarily, of course, this is to provide the best service and the safest service for ladies. But I suppose a secondary benefit as well, given here in Northern Ireland at the moment, blood patches are kind of a fairly sensitive issue. A bit of support and maybe protection for us as anaesthetists going forward doing them. How did we go about doing it? So Mitch took the first 6 months of the fellowship and did loads of work. So I really appreciate the hard work Mitch did. And he did a big literature review and created a first draft. Following that, we approached the NIOAN committee for their expert opinions and moving forward onto creating the document itself. And I think we were very successful in creating a regionally agreed management guideline for these ladies for accidental dural puncture and post-dural puncture headaches. So a bit about post-dural puncture headaches. The National Audit Project fair few years ago now showed that there are just over 160,000 labour epidurals per year across the UK. The incidence in the literature of a accidental dural puncture following epidural, the risk is anything below 1% up to just above 3%, with maybe even a third of accidental dural punctures going unrecognised at the time. The risk of subsequently developing a post-dural puncture headache is very high, almost 90%, 80 to 90%. And of course, we must remember that you can also develop post-dural puncture headaches from things, not just accidental dural punctures with TUI needles, but also from spinal anaesthetic and lumbar punctures. So what should we do? The immediate management, when you're there standing at the back and you get the waterfall of CSF, first thing is you stick your thumb over the end of the TUI needle and stop it pouring out, or put the trocar back in, and then it gives you time to stop and think. And then ask a friend, so calling for the senior anaesthetist or the consultant anaesthetist, whether they're on site or over the phone, is always a good thing to do. The steps you'll usually find, one of the 3 steps here would be the ones you'll take. So you can either take the needle out and re-site it. You may choose, if it's been particularly challenging to find the spot, place an intrathecal catheter. Or if it's been really horrible and nobody wants to carry on, then abandoning epidural analgesia and looking for an alternative. And depending on your site and your resources, that could be something like remifentanil PCA. Now, of course, the decision on which step to take comes with a communication and collaboration with the patient and with the multidisciplinary team. So the steps when you're the person there found and the midwives or your obstetric colleagues come to you and tell you there's a patient with suspected post-dural puncture headache. You go to see them, of course, take your history and exam, and you make your diagnosis on the information you find there. So first steps would be conservative management. So I'm sure you all know these steps. So oral hydration, caffeinated drinks, simple analgesia initially, so paracetamol, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. For very severe cases, some ladies might even require opioids. Daily anaesthetic review. Now, this can be ladies who stay on the ward, and we see them on the ward daily. Sometimes ladies are that, they want to get home, they've got families to be with, they want to push through the headache. Sometimes ladies do go home, and we follow them up on the phone daily until we see some resolution occurring. Something that we spoke about a lot actually was bed rest. Historically, some places might have thought that would be a good thing. It certainly is helpful for symptomatic relief, but it doesn't have any effect on the course or resolution of post-dural puncture headaches. And in ladies who kind of want to care for themselves and their babies around about this time, and also a high risk for VTE, we no longer recommend bed rest in the management of post-dural puncture headache. So on to epidural blood patches, the next step after failed conservative management or ladies who have very severe headaches and are unable to care for themselves or their babies. In the Royal Maternity in Belfast, in 2020, for example, there were 29 blood patches. So, we do a fair few. They are very effective. The literature would say 50 to 90% effective. And for those of you who've done them, you'll know there's that lovely time every now and then where the lady cries in relief as you're putting the blood into her back because she gets immediate relief, and that's just lovely. So they're really good. So how do we go about organising and doing a procedure? So pre-procedurally, preferably these procedures should be done after 48 hours post-accidental dural puncture. Prior to 48 hours, the efficacy is just a wee bit reduced. Written information and consent is essential. Now, these ladies usually will have been seen multiple times by the anaesthetic department prior to the decision to blood patch. So there's ample opportunity to provide early information and maybe even allude to the possibility of a blood patch and let them have time to think about these things. Baseline observations and bloods, also a good thing to get done early to rule out infection or coagulopathies. And then how do we go about doing blood patches? So theatre is the preferable location for this, for cleanliness sake, for space, for lighting, and for familiarity for us and whoever's helping us. 2 anaesthetists are required. One of these should be a senior, a consultant anaesthetist. We should choose, if possible, an interspace 1 or 2 below where we believe the accidental dural puncture happened. The venipuncture anaesthetist sterilely takes 20 to 30 mils of blood and then hands it over to the epiduralist. That's then injected into the epidural space. We should get as much up to 20 to 30 mils in as we can, but the injection should be stopped if the lady complains of paresthesia or pain. And post-procedure, what do we do? So 30 minutes of recovery observation. So they stay on in the post-operative recovery area, wherever you have in your localities, for 30 minutes, and then they can go back to the ward. They're to lie flat for 2 hours following the blood patch, and then they may actually go home the same day if they're well. And I think my experience is most of the ladies would go home the same day. It's important they go home with discharge information, and that should include the red flags to look out for. These are generally things related to cauda equina, neurological symptoms, and contact details, how to get in touch with us with any concerns or worries. They should also be followed up in an obstetric anaesthesia clinic in 6 to 8 weeks. So what we've done, we've produced a regional document with all of this to help us to make sure we tick all the boxes and provide the best care for these ladies. So there is, the document contains the management of the accidental dural puncture initially, initial assessment of the patients when you get to see them presenting with their post-dural puncture headache, likely in the postnatal ward. There's then a really nice 5-day follow-up pro forma, which makes sure you cover all the bases. And if you do get to doing an epidural blood patch, there's a nice record sheet there. And as I mentioned, the sensitivity of epidural blood patches at the moment, it's really good to have robust documentation. And then there's a patient and a GP letter provided also for them to go home with and to post onto the GP. So thank you very much also to the NIOAN committee. We went through multiple iterations and certainly couldn't have got such a robust and effective document without you. And again, thanks to Mitch, he did a lot of the work early on.
Super, thank you very much, Mitch. And actually, I think it's been an excellent day, and we're finishing on time, which is always good. Look, I'm left with the really nice job of handing out the prizes for the trainee presenters today. And I want to say it was a really high standard, a really excellent, good spread of projects, and I think it augurs well for the future of obstetric anaesthesia here in Northern Ireland. First I'd like to do this whole thing in reverse order, as one traditionally does. So in third place is Dr. Ciara Creel with her tea trolley teaching. And in second place, we have Dr. Manvi Singhal with her COVID coagulopathy series. And in first place, it's the regional anaesthetic alert bracelet with Dr. Mark McCaig. I think we'll all agree that's been a good day's CPD, and we got to see real live people with cups of coffee and everything. I have a couple of little thank yous that I do want to say. The first thing is that I want to say a massive thank you to Paula and Rosie and the entire team here at the Hilton in Templepatrick. They have been fantastic hosts for us over many years, and I think they've done us very well today, and I hope you've all enjoyed your day with their hospitality. I'd like to thank Roy and the Focus AV team, because we really, honestly, and I think that ran fairly well, didn't it? That ran really well. Because I'm so not tech, so I just have to be in awe of the people who can manage these things properly. So thank you very, very much, guys. It was fantastic. I want to thank all our speakers. I want to say thank you to all the trainees who spoke, because it's no mean feat to stand up in front of people and give your talk, and they were all excellent talks. And I think it will stand you in very good stead to have that kind of ability as you go forward in your career, and right up to your consultant interviews and so on. I'd like to thank all of you guys, actually, finally, because both everybody here in the room and anyone who's still out there on Zoom. And it's just to say that that's really what makes a meeting, is that interaction and just people taking part both in learning and educating and sharing that learning with each other. So there will be a date for your diary next year. We'll very shortly put it out on the website, and we'll hopefully see you all again. Enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your weekend. I can already taste the G&T. So have a great weekend, safe home, and thank you very much for being part of what I think has been a very successful day. Thank you. Sorry, I do need kept in check here. Dr. Martin has reminded me, would you please scan that little code, and that will be for your feedback. It takes you to SurveyMonkey, and you fill out your feedback. And then there's a link there that you can then get your CPD cert. And this has been approved, as you know, for 5 points from the college. Okay, folks, and that's us. Thank you very much.